Shazam is the latest film in the DCEU. It is directed by David Sandberg. It is the 6th film in the DCEU, I'm pretty sure. No, I'm pretty sure it's the 6th one. It's the 6th one, okay? There is no 7th one. We know that now. Film stars Asher Angel, Zachary Levi, Mark Strong, Jack Dylan Grazer, I believe is his name. Also stars Jimon Hansu, who is in another one of those movies where he has to really act his ass off in a very small and ultimately pointless role, but get your money, brother. I'm not mad at you. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the comic book story and origin of Shazam, but Shazam is basically what would happen if a kid or a teenage kid ended up magically getting the powers of Superman. That's what this movie is about. The story follows Billy Batson, who's a foster kid. He's bounced back and forth between a lot of different foster homes. He gets hooked up with this one foster family that has a bunch of other kids that also live with that family. One day while he's riding the train, bus, one of those two, he gets magically scooped up and transported to some lair where Jimon Hansu basically says, "Say my name and get my power." So Billy Batson says his name and all of a sudden, bam! Due to magic, he all of a sudden has the powers of a superhero. Now he has to deal with this while also dealing with the villain of the movie, played by Mark Strong, who is also after the magic that gave Billy his powers. Speaking of magic, Mark Strong also played a character in another movie. I'm pretty sure it was the Kingsman movies, where his character's name was Merlin. So I don't know, life has its small coincidences. To give you guys some info before I get started, similar to Aquaman back in December, I'm not the hugest fan of Shazam. I do appreciate and respect him and his place in the DC lore, and obviously I've read a few of his comics, but he's just not one of my faves. I like the trailer for this movie, and it's DC, so I'll probably go see it anyways, and so I actually was excited to see this movie a little bit early. If I had to describe this movie in one word, I would probably say joyous. This is a very joyous superhero movie. This is a film that has a sincerity and a genuine lightheartedness to its tone and its approach and its style. In that sense, it's a comic book movie that reminds me of maybe some of those earlier comic book movies that came out in the early 2000s, or maybe some of them that came out back in the day, like the Superman movies. This is a film that, plain and simple, is all about the awe and the wonder and the enjoyment and the happiness that comes with being a superhero. Just picture that. A kid, you're like a 13, 14-year-old kid, you've had a tough life, and then all of a sudden magic happens and boom, you can do pretty much anything. Of course, it wouldn't really change my approach in life, it just might make my approach in life even better, because I would be using my powers to, yep, you guessed it. Guys, I'd love to convince you that I would be a different type of superhero, like I would just use my powers for good and I wouldn't be, but no, I'm sorry, that's just not me. I'm in it for me, which is a clear example why I should not be Superman or any other kind of superhero, because I would use my powers for me. One thing that saves this movie from being like a dumb, fun, forgettable, throwaway type of movie is the emotion at its core, because what this movie actually is a family drama. Family dynamic of this movie is the best thing about it. The foster family that takes Billy in, his relationship with each member of that family and how it changes and goes up and down and the ebbs and flows of how they connect with each other. Obviously, his relationship with Freddy is like a big selling point in the movie. You guys saw that in the trailers. I will say every scene between Freddy and Billy is comedic gold. Absolute comedic gold. I love Freddy. Jack Dylan Grazer does such a great job in this movie as Freddy. I love him. I love Freddy. He's like one of my new favorite characters in the DCEU. I love Freddy so much because Freddy is me. Like, Freddy reminds me of how I would be in this situation. Just the ultimate DC fanboy. He loves everything about DC. He knows everything about everything that is DC. He would be my spirit animal if such a thing existed. This movie definitely references and name drops and Easter eggs the shit out of the rest of the universe. This is a standalone film for sure, but it's a standalone film that doesn't try to ignore the bigger universe at work. Like, there are some really great callbacks and references to a lot of the other DC films that have come before. Most of the performances in the movie are really good, especially with the family. Mark Strong is, you know, he's Mark Strong. Mark always gives a strong performance. Yeah, I know, it's corny, but, you know, that's the kind of movie I'm reviewing. I have to bring some of that corniness out with me. Some fun DC action sequences. There are actually quite a few surprises that made it into the movie that I didn't know were going to be in the movie. Stay tuned after the credits. There are 2 post-credit scenes. One of them is kind of a setup for things to come, and another one is, well, it's just more of like a funny thing. You can take it or leave it, I guess. The film is well shot. It has a great musical score. David Sandberg does such a great job at balancing the different tones between light and between darkness. There's actually like some horror vibes you get from this movie. Not surprising because David Sandberg has directed other horror movies like Lights Out and like Annabelle Creation. Quick shout out to Zachary Levi. He did such a great job at bringing this character to life and making you really believe that he was a 14-year-old kid. I do appreciate Mark Strong and his performance as a villain. I am a little bit disappointed with what they decide to do with his character. Setup for Mark Strong's villain is actually really strong. He does get a backstory. There's a certain point in the movie where I feel like his character just kind of stopped being interesting and he just became kind of a generic MCU villain. Mark Strong does a pretty decent job with what he's given to work with, but I just feel like at a certain point in the movie, he's not given that much to work with and he just kind of becomes, I'm a bad guy because the movie needs a bad guy. I'd probably say most of my issues with this movie are in the third act. The third act of this movie is very uneven in my opinion. There are characters and plot lines converging and flipping from all over the place. It's kind of a mess. Things and characters change depending on what the story actually requires it to be at that moment. I recognize that this is a film that doesn't have the biggest budget, but that means that I do have to call it out when I see mediocre CGI. And this movie definitely does have some mediocre to below average CGI, especially in that third act. In general, compared to some of the other high octane action sequences in the rest of the DCEU, I must say I left a little bit underwhelmed. It had a really great heart to it. I thought it had great comedy, and it had some really great character moments with Billy and with, Freddy. In the end, I enjoyed Shazam, but I can't quite get it to love, and I will leave this movie in the Silver Age for Man of Steel. I hope you guys get a chance to check it out when it comes out in like a week or two or whatever. Alright guys, new question. If you had a superhero ability, what would that ability be? Go ahead and tell me in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace!